Hello guys, how is everyone? Now, today there's news which is coming out that a Chinese company called G-Space has launched about 10 satellites into space. And those satellites have been set into what is called the LEO or low Earth orbit space. So they are looking at it, especially in the Western world, as a company that is going to rival Tesla, all right? Tesla, of course, SpaceX, Elon Musk. So Elon Musk has put up his, internet system under, SpaceX, and the Starlink system is going to provide internet to almost all the world. Is already providing internet to the rest of the internet for the rest of the United States and also other parts of the world. We saw South Africa confirmed. We saw in Ghana recently, they confirmed, Zimbabwe has confirmed, Kenya has confirmed, Nigeria too, they are using it. So we did a video on this recently. And of course, this is the article that we are talking about. You can have a look at it. This is the article that we are talking about, which came out from Reuters and other, European and Western platforms. Now, we did a video on this, as I was saying. And in this particular video, we asked a question, which of course, as Africans, we need to pay very close attention to. We asked a question, is this good for us? The fact that a Starlink internet is being used across the African continent. And the reason we asked these questions, these are legitimate questions, seriously, when it comes to national security for the African continent, especially. It's not merely economic. It's not that everything that is economically beneficial is beneficial when it comes to issues of national security, and especially when it comes to the African continent, the interests of the African continent, long-term interests, long-term security interests of the African continent. So these are the reasons, or this was the reason why we asked these particular questions. Is this good for the long-term interest of the African continent? The fact that we are hooking ourselves into this so-called Starlink of Elon Musk. Is this good for us as a continent? And of course, we have seen Elon Musk recently, having a strong contest with the Brazilian government with his Twitter or X, right? And he even threatened actually to cut off the Brazilian military from internet because it looks like they are operating using his SpaceX platform. And the other thing is that SpaceX itself has been financed by the United States, NASA, okay, National Space Agency of the United States, and of course the United States government and Pentagon. They have interest in it simply because they want to control this internet, and the United States always has interest in controlling other people's infrastructure, so that of course they can put sanctions on you anytime they want, and they should scare us. And so this is what we saw with Brazil, that because Brazil was threatening to ban X in Brazil because of Elon Musk, and the fact that he's been using it even in some cases to spread misinformation within Brazil. We saw him spreading a lot of misinformation in Venezuela. We have seen Elon Musk himself in many cases spreading misinformation, and of course he belongs to the right wing. He belongs to the right wing. We know this very well. And right wing basically means, defending white supremacy. And in the past, even we have had him in his comments. I've been following him myself. I was inspired to some extent by his, ingenuity and the fact that, he's forward-looking, his inventiveness. When you look at, of course, Tesla Motors. But when you listen to him, you can hear him saying that Western civilization is going to collapse. Western civilization needs to be protected. So even though he comes from, Africa, where he was born in South Africa, you don't see anything in him which defends Africa or does anything to contribute to Africa. So it tells you that he knows where he came from. He came from Europe. The fact that he was born in South Africa, it doesn't mean that he's an African. So this actually also helps us to get to put some clarity on our brothers. You know, some of our brothers who are in, you know, on the other side of the Atlantic, in the Western Hemisphere. Some of them, of course, who say they are African descendants of slaves, idols, and others who say they are FBA, fundamentally black Americans. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as African descendants of slaves, fundamentally black. All these people are African. Of course, in some ways, they have been renamed to be called African Americans. So this is what it teaches us. For you African Americans who are out there and still want to identify yourself with the United States and don't want to identify yourself with Africa, regardless of how weak Africa is. Because look at Elon Musk. He was born in South Africa. He never says that he's an African. He talks about Western civilization, defending Western civilization. And all his contributions have been to Western civilization, the survival of Western civilization. All right? And this is maybe one of the reasons why he has so many children, because he thinks that Western civilization is about to collapse. You can hear him, you know, in all his talks and his conversation. And I said I've been following him for quite some time. So this is how he treated, you know, Brazil, by threatening that he would cut off the internet from Brazil, and especially from the Brazilian military. And so this is a cause of concern. So this is why it is very important for the Chinese, as they see it for themselves, to put up their own satellites and set up their own internet in space, instead of waiting to depend on the West. And of course, this is what we are also calling for when we come to the African continent. We have to be very clear as Africans also that this generation cannot allow things to go on as they went on in the past. And that's why it pains me, myself, to see people like President Ruto giving out a very important airport, an extremely important, strategically important airport to foreigners. This airport is the most important airport in the East African region. Okay, this airport, which is the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, is strategic. Is a strategic infrastructure for the East African region itself. That is, if you're talking about, you know, Kenya itself, if you're talking about Uganda, if you're talking about South Africa, if you're talking about Tanzania, if you're talking about Tanzania, if you're talking about Eastern Congo, you know, if you're talking about Burundi and Rwanda, all these countries, this airport is the biggest, is the busiest, and is the most profitable airport in the East African region. Now, how do you turn such a strategic asset and claim that you want to introduce public-private partnership and give it to an Indian to operate it? For what reason? For whatever reason you are justifying it and say you are leasing it. So this is why it bleeds my heart. It pains my heart to hear such things, that in this era in which we are living, whereby Ethiopia is planning to build the biggest airport on the African continent, the biggest airport in East Africa, President William Ruto is giving out to this airport. We should instead be consolidating these strategic assets instead of giving them out, instead of disgracing ourselves. Kenya, like we said, is spending more than $8 billion every single year on salaries. Can't we cut some of this money and save it and build the airport ourselves? And then how much is it building? How much is it bringing into Kenya to build this airport, to rehabilitate this airport? You can see that he is bringing in a simple $1.84 billion. $1.8 billion. This is some money which can be raised within Kenya so that we can build this airport by ourselves and protect it. And if you cannot do it in Kenya, why not talk to the East African region and consult with them and tell them, you guys, this is a strategic asset for all of us. We have the East African community. This is a strategic asset for all of us. I would advise that you talk to your businessmen, you talk to yourself. Even you governments, raise this money and let us rehabilitate this airport or expand it so that it can serve all of us. It is serving all of us. So that even the benefits that come from operating this airport can remain here with us. And these are not the questions these people are asking themselves. But let us look at what the Chinese, of course, are doing so that we can learn. We need to learn. As Africans, we need to pay attention, close attention to these important aspects of our continent so that we don't get enslaved again. We need to pay attention to science and technology, and that is what is happening. The Chinese are paying attention. They saw Elon Musk investing, and the United States, of course, is supporting him, because Elon Musk would not have achieved this if it was not for the United States government. It is the United States government that has helped him to achieve whatever he has achieved, including Tesla Motors itself as a company, because if it was not for government money, Tesla would not have succeeded. He would have failed. But it was government money which helped Tesla to succeed. So it shows you that these people, they use the state when they want to, and yet they come to the African continent and they lie to our gullible, personnel who are at the helm of our affairs in our countries, to tell them that it is the private sector. Leave it to the private sector. Have you ever heard something like that? For someone who is in their right mind, they are not paying attention to what is happening on the other side of the Atlantic or across the north in Europe, and asking them, but you guys, look, wait a minute. This is what you are doing in your countries. Why are you coming to our continent and telling us that we should move in this particular direction, in the opposite direction of what you are doing? You guys are using the state to reinforce your dominance, but you are telling us that we should use the private sector. Where is even the private sector on the African continent? So these are the questions, of course, that we should be asking as serious people who want to change this continent. And therefore, I'm saying this, that as a continent, we need to pay close attention to science and technology, not to just follow and use other people's technology, but we should also ask questions. How does this benefit us? How does this benefit our continent? And especially the next generation. I have hope in the next generation. Our generation has to make a change to this particular continent. We cannot move and be like the older generations which are going out, which are selling and mortgaging out Africa's assets instead of consolidating those assets so that we can get leverage upon which we can best to negotiate with the rest of the world. And of course, it has been unfortunate in many cases that the heads of state have gone in the opposite direction of what is beneficial to the African continent, including the resources. And we have to redeem the African continent. But let us look at what the Chinese are saying and what they are achieving. Now, G-Space, a company backed by Chinese automaker Geely, said on Friday it launched a third batch of satellites as part of its plan to form a mega constellation it described as China's equivalent to US firm SpaceX's Starlink. Now, look, even here, in some cases, they don't even call it, space, they don't call it Elon Musk's firm. Now, they are calling it United States firm, SpaceX, Starlink. So this belongs to the United States. And why? Because if the United States wants you to be cut off from this internet, it just tells SpaceX that you cut them off. It tells the United States military, cut them off. We have seen that SpaceX has been used even in Ukraine. It has been used in Ukraine to attack Russia. All right? So if the United States wants to cut Africa off, we have seen many governments on the African continent, they have come out to endorse this, to give licenses to SpaceX to operate it. And of course, ashamedly, some of the African government, you will see that they will hook onto this SpaceX, whereby these guys can hack into this network and even collect the data from our governments. Of course, it is a shame. It's unfortunate. Now, this is what the Chinese are doing. The Chinese, instead of hooking onto SpaceX's Starlink, they are putting up their own Starlink in space. Where is Africa? India has gone to space with this, with an economy which is almost the same size as ours. India's economy is the same size as ours. It's just of recent that India's economy has grown to $3.7 trillion. Africa's economy has been on the same level for some time as India at $3.5 trillion. Now, India has gone to space. India has a space program. India has plenty automobile companies legitimate automobile companies like Mahindra, Tata. Tata even went as far as buying Land Rover, which makes the Range Rovers and the Defenders, all right, and the Freelanders. Now, how come Africa does not have these things and we are still moving about across the world begging? How come we are still moving across the world begging others for the same things that we have? We have the money to be able to do these things. But because our continent is fragmented and many people are talking, we do not have one voice saying one sensible thing. We have different people saying a lot of nonsense, a lot of noise. Different countries are running in different directions. And therefore, in many cases, you even find there's duplication of activities and wastage. So what is happening on the African continent is wastage. And that wastage is what we have to stop. We have to find a way of stopping this wastage and consolidating our GDP as a continent, consolidating our resources as a continent, consolidating our land as a continent, because our land is even 12 times that of India, and yet we have the same population, but we have much more resources than India. So we should be able to achieve much more. They have different companies, aerospace. They are constructing, they are building their own planes. They are building their own trains. They are building their own machines. Where is our machines that we are building as Africans? So these are the critical questions. So the Chinese came out to say that they will put up their own SpaceX, their own Starlink to compete that of the United States. Not to compete that of Elon Musk, but to compete that of the United States. Because, like I said, let's be honest, Starlink and SpaceX have majorly succeeded because of United States money, and the United States government has a stake in these companies. Now, the 10 low orbit, the 10 low Earth orbit satellites were launched from the Tingwan Satellite Launch Center, located in the northern province of Shaanxi. G-Space said in a statement, with this latest launch, the constellation which they are building, they are building a constellation. A constellation basically means a group of satellites, right? So they are saying that the constellation now has 30 satellites. They sent 10. They had earlier sent about 20 of them, all right? These 30 satellites, actually, the constellation which they are building, it covers 90% of the globe with 24-hour communication services, G-Space said. This deployment marks the first time a Chinese commercial aerospace company has offered low Earth orbit satellite communication on a global scale, the company said. Now, what is clear here is this, that this company, it wants to compete with Starlink. And this is what we should be thinking as Africans. We should not be thinking about xenophobia. This is low thinking. This is way below. It is low thinking. It's basic thinking to be thinking about xenophobia, be thinking about, Chidima, she's a Nigerian, she should not compete in South African, beauty pageant. This is low thinking. We should be thinking in space. We should be going to space. We should be thinking about building space programs together as Africans. All right? We should be thinking about going to space together as Africans. But what do you think? My name is Kwame Gonza, and this is called Connect Africa and Africa Reimagined. Please like the channel, support the channel, and share it with others. And support the channel through our PayPal account. Support the channel also through a super chat, so that we can continue to be here as broadcasters and servants of the African continent. These are our thoughts, but we think that Africa has to go in a different direction as per now, because it has been going for a very